So I've heard your disappointment and discontent, and I've brought the viewers what they want. Teddy, say hello to your friends. Teddy, say hello. They missed you. They missed you right there. There they are. Say hello to your friends. All right, goodbye. Why, hello there, endurance nerds. You're joining my ugly mug for the second time in a calendar year. Hell, the second time in a month. What fresh hell is this? I'm scared too.
Please press the thumbs up button. I find imbeciles amusing.
Anyway, moving along. For those of you who watched my recent reaction to the bike radar video, you might remember that I mentioned after several points that they made that it would have been a great opportunity unto itself for a video, should it have been presented in a way to educate rather than to judge. And despite the negative perception that I walked away with from that video, I decided to make something positive of it, and I wanted to make some of those videos that I mentioned myself. Now, over the course of the past several years on this channel, I've discussed these topics, and they've typically been embedded in longer form videos, but I thought it might be beneficial to break some of those ideas down into their own standalone videos that will hopefully provide some value to the existing and new viewers alike. In today's video, I want to make the logical expansion of the very first criticism the bike radar video expressed about training indoors on programs like Zwift, and that's the interference of terrain and other riders on the road with the quality of the sessions. Because hell, nobody wants to be seen riding around aimlessly.
What you could call riding around aimlessly without achieving any physiological goals, such as improving VO2 max.
Now, do they? So rather than to gripe about those challenges, I thought I would make a video covering how you can avoid ruining your ride, or more accurately, straying from your objective while riding on Zwift or those other immersive platforms. Now, if you're riding for health, lifestyle, enjoyment, there really is no wasted session. However, many of you are probably looking to train towards a specific goal. Maybe you're going for a race, a fondo, to beat a segment time. And endurance sport is about delayed gratification. Today's workout doesn't always benefit you tomorrow. In fact, you're likely going to be worse tomorrow. As you ride, you put damage into the systems, and the body needs to undergo supercompensation to bring you back stronger as you continue to add load and intensity to your rides. The work you do today will not necessarily pay off for weeks, if not months, as you continue to stack those workouts over time. So it can be difficult to stay disciplined to a session when the benefits are so far out in the future. And sometimes it's just not enough to know this fact. Now, we all have an ego. It's not uncommon to feel self-doubt on the day, as the spotlight effect has us all believing that we're being watched, which can be especially tempting being out on Zwift surrounded by thousands of other riders, whether we're moving too slowly up a hill or being passed by that other rider like we're going backwards. But realistically, very few people are concerned with what we are doing. Those others out there that we believe are judging us are likely preoccupied with their own activities and who might be judging them. Those people who do take the time out of their day to fixate on what you're doing and celebrate passing you outside of a race scenario are few and far between and not really worth a second thought. They can probably use a good puzzle or other entertainment device. Now, even knowing this, temptation can strike. We don't care that that person who just passed us might be riding on a different day. They passed us. We can't abide that, or can we? I truly believe that we can eliminate or at least mitigate those temptations to stray from our plan, and I want to share some strategies today that I've used over the years that has been helpful to stay disciplined to my plan when I'm following a particular objective. And these strategies can help you with a combination of structured workouts or those kind of longer, free-form, maybe endurance rides that will hopefully help you to stay on track. Now, there's no single strategy that will work every single time. Rather, this is just a list of tools that you can employ as different needs arise in your training. So without any further ado, let me jump into the tips. The first tip that I have for you is to pick the right course. Now, whether you're in workout mode or you're doing those longer endurance rides, you want to pick a course that is appropriate to the demands of the workout. For those endurance rides, you don't necessarily want to choose a course that's going to routinely bog you down on those steeper slopes that are invariably going to force you to ride over zone 2 and start engaging those type 2 muscle fibers, which contradicts the purpose of your ride. Conversely, for those intensity workouts, sometimes it helps to pick a course with terrain that matches the demands of the session. Perhaps now those climbs can give you a visual signal that will help to motivate you to stay on the power and push right to the very end of those intervals. I, for example, have used Alta Zwift a number of times to do threshold or sweet spot efforts, as while I'm on the on efforts, I'm making pretty good time uphill. And when I do go slow on those recoveries, I'm just more motivated when the next intervals come to make up the time on that next effort. The next tip I have for you is to play with your settings. Use the trainer difficulty setting if you're using Zwift. Now, I'm not going into detail today on what trainer difficulty is. I have several videos on that I can leave down below. But suffice it to say, it's a slider in your settings menu, and it ranges from minimum to maximum, and it basically dictates how realistic the resistance to your trainer is to the gradient being shown out on the road on Zwift. Now, your speed is not going to change, but your experience with the trainer will. Your power, whether it's indoors or out, is often driven by the need to maintain momentum, and as the terrain changes, so does the the resistance you feel through the pedals. And in order to maintain speed or momentum, you're going to have to adjust your power accordingly. The way your trainer responds as you move through terrain on Zwift is going to be very similar to what you experience on the real road. Now think of the slider as percentages of the actual gradient. So at halfway up the slider, a 10% gradient will simulate the resistance of 5%, requiring a less dramatic change in your cadence and your gearing. You won't necessarily have to push as much power to feel like you're getting the same response at the flywheel of your trainer. Now, if you're looking to do those longer sustained efforts in free ride mode, that can be zone 2 endurance, sweet spot efforts, or even threshold. It can help to be a little bit more agnostic to the undulations and terrains on the road so that you don't stray from your power objectives and you stay in a tighter locus of power around your goal. In those cases, it can help to turn your trainer difficulty down between maybe 10 and 25%. Don't turn it all the way off. You still want to retain some feedback at the pedals so that you remain engaged in the work itself, but that in conjunction with choosing the right course, you won't necessarily need to respond to those extremes in terrain, and you can keep that power consistently at your target output. The third tip I have is to leverage pace partners and groups. Now, this may seem like an obvious feature, but using a pace partner or a tight group ride can help you to stay disciplined to a sustained power. Whether you want to ride endurance, tempo, sweet spot, what have you, there's likely a group out there that's going to meet those ends. Now, I highly recommend using pace partners because A, they run 24/7, B, they cover nearly every power range imaginable, and C, and probably most importantly, they tend to be much more disciplined to the pace. Not to say that there aren't good group rides, but the pace partners are pretty strict. They use a dynamic pacing model that helps to keep your power output tight enough to maintain the intended power zone that you're looking for, but also variable enough to keep you engaged and mitigate maybe some of that boredom and that desire to vary, and you're going to be rewarded with that speed benefit of sticking with the group. That's important for a lot of you folks who are looking to continue to level up in the game. We're here for those experience points, right? Those groups can help to motivate you stay on pace, especially as the minutes and hours tick by, and maybe you start to get a little fatigued mentally and or physically, and you don't want to lose that wheel in that draft, so it can help to keep you on that pace. Additionally, if you're in a cluster of riders, you can pull your focus away from maybe some of those outliers that could be passing you by, and they're a lot easier to ignore when you're focusing on staying with that group. Now, it is important to keep in mind that not everything is always as it seems when you're on Zwift. There's going to be, of course, those riders who are stronger than you, and those that are just on a different day, and they are going to pass you by. But there are also a good number of riders, it's not a majority, but there's plenty of them, that are using things like Ant Plus simulators. They're weight doping. They're manipulating their power in some way or another. So don't get sucked into the threat of competition that you didn't ask for by somebody who might not be playing on a level playing field. You're going to be much better off hanging tight with your pace partner or your group, and you're going to be better off in the long run sticking to your plan. The next tip I have for you is to leverage Erg Mode. Now, if you really find it tough to maintain your power, whether it's going to come from that temptation to chase down other riders or from just general distraction, Erg Mode will absolutely keep you in mind. Now, not everybody is a fan, but it can be a very powerful tool. If you do want to understand Erg Mode in more detail, I have an entire video about it on my channel. I will leave that down below as well. But essentially, Erg Mode is going to use your power output to adjust the resistance to give you the feedback that you need at the trainer via its braking mechanism to maintain the prescribed power. So it's going to start with a fixed resistance, and if you are not meeting the prescribed power, it's going to add or subtract resistance so that it gives you that physical feedback so that you adjust to meet the directive or the target on the screen. For example, if your power is lower than the target or the prescribed output, it's going to add braking or add resistance to you to try to incite you to add more power. It might think that there's just not enough resistance there to bring you up to the target output. Conversely, if your power is higher than the prescribed output, it's going to start to release that brake and incite that decrease in power, thinking that the resistance is set too high, forcing that higher power, and it wants you to adjust. So if you're going to go try to chase down those other riders and you suddenly surge to go chase that avatar, Erg Mode is going to back the resistance way down in pretty short order, and you're not going to get too far. So it's going to force the issue for you a little bit and keep you on target. It'll help you also as your attention or your focus starts to stray a little bit and you start to drop off that power. Erg Mode is going to give you that immediate feedback by adding braking resistance if you're going too light on the power, and it's going to remind you, oh, I've got to wake up and I've got to add a little more torque or cadence to my output. You can use a pre-made or custom workout and leverage it for any type of ride you wish. You can do it for intensity or you can even do it for endurance. minutes. You can schedule anything from 5 minutes all the way out to 5 hours or more if you want to use Erg Mode to keep your power strictly aligned with your prescribed output. I'm not going to say that riding 3 hours at zone 2 in Erg Mode is the most exciting thing out there, but if you're looking to kind of zone out and just plug out those miles, it can be an effective tool. The next tip I have for you is to ride on Zwift 100% by yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? We can all just jump on Zwift, not jump into a group ride or just ignore the other riders around us, but you can also ride on Zwift where you're ultimately alone out on the roads. You don't have to be a social person to be on Zwift, but you might also be that person that just can't help yourself. Or maybe you just have a key session that you want to remove as much distraction and noise as possible, but you still want the interface of those visuals on the road to kind of give you that sense of movement and immersion. It is possible to ride on Zwift by yourself or very close to it. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. The first one is to select a world that is not active on the day. So every day there are 3 worlds available on Zwift. Watopia is fixed and is always available to every rider, and then there are going to be 2 guest worlds that follow a schedule that is published on a calendar out in advance, and those rotate periodically throughout the weeks and the months. Now, the overwhelming majority of the thousands of riders on Zwift at any point in time are going to be concentrated on those available 3 worlds. So those might be pretty busy, especially at peak hours. If you ride on an inactive world, you are going to be virtually by yourself. Now, there's 2 ways of doing this. The first way is, if you are on PC or Mac, is to use a program called Zwift Preferences. I have a video on the details of that program. I will list that down below as well. But the Cliffs Notes version is that it's kind of like a developer mode to open up settings for Zwift that lives on your machine. And you can manipulate some of those settings without destroying the core files attached to the program. And one of those settings that you can manipulate is what the primary or default world is. So you can change that from Watopia to any world that you wish. So let's say, for instance, it's Monday, and Watopia is available as always, as well as Richmond and Yorkshire. You want to ride more or less by yourself. You can use Zwift Preferences, and you can load up McCurry as the primary world, and you will be riding virtually alone. The only other people on those worlds or those courses are going to be those that are manipulating it as well. And that's a very, very small fraction of the total population riding around on Zwift. But if you're not on PC or Mac, or you're not really keen on installing an extra executable, you can use the workout selection. So when you go into the workout selection mode that was updated about a year ago, every time you select a workout in Zwift, you will be prompted to select a course. It will give you a number of recommended courses that kind of fit the profile of the workout, but you can ultimately choose any world and any course that you want. If you go down to the world selection and select the course that you would prefer, you will spawn pretty much anywhere you want inside of Zwift. And again, you are going to be virtually by yourself. Now, if you don't want to do the workout on Zwift, you just quit the workout, not the ride. You quit the workout from inside of that course where you spawned, and then you can continue to ride around in free ride mode as long as you want. The second option you can use if you really want to ride completely by yourself on a completely abandoned Zwift is one that I don't like as much, and I'll talk about why here in a moment, but that's to ride offline. Now, this is a method that is used by some creators out there who do some A/B testings, people like Eric from Zwift Insider or Shane from GP Llama. When they're looking to compare bikes or equipment to each other and they're doing speed tests, what they will do is they'll use something like a dummy account and an Ant Plus simulator so they can eliminate all the variables and compare speeds or any other variables within Zwift. And those tests will be completely unencumbered by other riders and draft impact on the road, and their avatar is not impacting other riders. It's very simple to do this. As soon as you spawn into the course that you selected, you turn off your internet connection. You just toggle it off on your computer or on your mobile device. I'm not confident that this will work on Apple TV, so somebody can give me some feedback down below if you know whether or not this works. But for those devices where the game is actually stored on the hard drive of the unit itself, this does work. My concerns come from the fact that a lot of times when Zwift sees crashes or instabilities, it does come from the user's network connection. So when people have dropouts and things to that effect, it can sometimes cause Zwift to crash. Now, usually if you just turn it off and then turn it back on one time, you won't have an issue, but there is a low risk. And I want you to be aware of that risk before you use this technique. The last thing I want to see happen to you guys is either A, you crash out of your ride, or B, you lose your data when you try to reactivate your internet connection to save and upload your ride. The next tip I have for you is to just simply run Zwift in the background. And this is better for those people who are doing those Zone 2 sessions, as sometimes those longer rides indoors can get a little bit boring and stale. You don't necessarily have the scenery moving around in 3 dimensions around you or that nice outdoor breeze running in your face. And by the end of 2-3 hours of riding around on Zwift, yes, things can get a little bit boring. And that temptation to chase down those other riders or pick up the pace can definitely be more prevalent. Now, Zwift does not need to be front row center. You can have Zwift just running in the background, especially if you're running on like a PC or Mac. Just pull up another window in front of it, watch a TV show, a movie, some YouTube videos like this this one, hit the like button, all of that stuff. But you can monitor your power using either a head unit, or you can simply use the Zwift companion app and just see the metrics in front of you. I've minimized the screen to just a small footprint on my larger TV screen just to monitor my power and heart rate, whatever works for you, but you don't have to dial in on what's going on in the screen. This is a really good tip to pair up with using that trainer difficulty and or that choosing the right course tip so that you can just kind of maintain a constant cadence and torque and just zone out a little bit. I've noticed that for me, if I don't feel like watching a movie or TV and that's a little bit too distracting for me, if I'm listening to something mentally engaging, so instead of music, I might be listening to an audiobook or a podcast, and I'm engrossed in the content that I'm listening to, I might be looking at the screen and I'm immersed in the fact that I'm moving through a virtual world, but I'm not necessarily reacting to it, right? I'm kind of remaining cognizant of my power and my heart rate, but the avatars passing me by or the terrain that might be slightly changing, they kind of fade in the background for me. So this doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but I figured I'd throw it out there as an option. The next tip I have is regarding rewards and feedback mechanisms. I'm going to tread very delicately into the realm of psychology here, but I know that building discipline and habits can be really difficult. Rewards and punishment, or maybe better stated, positive and negative feedback, can be very powerful tools. Depending on what you need, you can kind of scale back those mechanisms to you. If you are one of those people who needs that immediate gratification or consequence to your actions, then you can tie your binge-worthy TV show or your favorite after-dinner treat to completing your session 90% or better as prescribed. Or conversely, if it works better for you, the punishment is not necessarily being able to do those things if it's something that you typically enjoy, if you stray from your goal. Maybe if you don't necessarily need that daily motivation or you get more disciplined over time, perhaps you treat yourself at the end of the week to a meal out or going to a movie or something that you enjoy. On a longer timeline, maybe you allow yourself to buy that new toy you've been eyeing up at the end of a month or a really tough training block. The positive versus negative approach really depends on your personal response and your own personal psychology. I'm not sitting here by any means recommending that people deprive themselves or flagellate themselves if they do something wrong, but we all respond to different methods of feedback. We use it from children all the way to adults in our personal lives and in our professional lives. We know that it works, and you can leverage it to work for you when it comes to sticking to your plan or your objectives. The next tip I have for you is to lean into your competitive nature a little bit. That nature of delayed gratification that comes from endurance sports can be very difficult to contend with. And the further you progress through your training plan and your experience as a rider, the more you just want to have fun with your fitness, right? You want to rip the pedals off the bike. You've earned it. And your key event shouldn't be the only time that you get to truly unleash your power and enjoy the fruits of your labor. Submitting to that urge can really derail your plan if you're following a particular plan or working towards a particular goal. So there's a few methods that I've used in the past that I found pretty effective. One is if you just itch to compete every time you throw your leg over the bike, maybe you work in Zwift races to supplant some of those higher intensity workouts that you may have on your plan, right? Those VO2 max efforts, those anaerobic or neuromuscular efforts. Instead of doing those structured workouts, maybe you throw in a race once, maybe twice a week. You put those in as a replacement for workouts because they are going to very closely simulate, if not better simulate, the demands of those workouts and work those energy systems just as well, with the additional benefit of practicing for more kind of real world scenarios where you just have to react to what the road and the other riders give you, especially if you're a competitive racer. But in return, if you do supplant those workouts with those races, the other 6 days or 5 days a week, however many other workout days that you have that week, you do need to stay disciplined. So it is a give and take. You still need to use that discipline, but you do give yourself permission to have fun and be competitive. Maybe you're not necessarily competitive with other folks, but you are competitive with yourself and you love to go out and crush those climbs or those segments on your own. Again, you can fall into the trap of doing that too often. So maybe you allow yourself on 1 or 2 Saturdays or whatever your long ride days are in your 4 to 6 week block to just allow you to free form do that. Attack those climbs, attack those segments, set those PRs. And then you can follow those sessions up with one of those low zone 2 days. Maybe that's on a Sunday and a rest day on a Monday. That way you can shed the fatigue that comes from those types of rides and get back to your plan, because that really is the most damaging part of straying from the plan, is that most people overdo it and bake in more fatigue, and then they're not able to recover. They end up in a deep dark hole, and then they end up derailing their fitness over the long haul or over a training block. Or for those long endurance rides that you might have once or twice a week on your calendar, you can give yourself a set number of maybe matches to burn. For instance, in a 2-hour zone 2 ride, you can give yourself 3 matches of no more than 3 minutes apiece that you can use any way you please. Whether you want to go for that sprint banner, go up that short climb like Hilly KOM or Titans Grove Reverse, or just chase down another avatar on the road. You can use it in the beginning when you're still fresh and you want to rip the pedals off the bike. Maybe do that at the end when you know you start to get bored and the ride gets stale. Or maybe that recurring segment or climb that you pass a few times on the chosen course. Or you can just just do it when the spirit moves you. But the compromise there is that when you're out of those 3 matches or whatever the appropriate number is for your particular ride, you are out. And then you have to maintain that zone 2 for the remainder of the ride. Now, some people will criticize that you're completely undermining the purpose of a zone 2 workout if you do that. But in a 2-hour ride, if you're spending at most 5 to 6 minutes above your zone 2, you still achieved 95% of the workout, and the additional fatigue that you've baked in from those small efforts is going to be negligible. I'd much rather see people get 95% of the workout done as prescribed than 75 or 50%, because once they relent to that temptation once, they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's kind of like when people cheat on their diet for a particular meal and then the whole day's wrecked. They just ignore those fundamentals that they've been sticking to for a long period of time and completely derail themselves. The same thing goes here. If you allow yourself those 3 options to stray and to kind of have fun and do what you want to do, you don't feel like you've completely destroyed the workout, so you just kind of throw your hands up. You've done what you've planned to do, and you can continue to move forward and finish the workout as prescribed. This list is by no means exhaustive. There are things that have worked for me in the past. I'm sure there are things that I've used that I've forgotten to include here. I'd love to hear strategies and techniques that you guys have used to keep you mentally and physically on track during maybe those workouts that might be more difficult for you. Leave those in the comments below and share them with the rest of the community. I hope that you guys found this to be a more valuable foray into this subject than what we reacted to maybe the other day. I want to see more people to achieve their goals in cycling, whether it's just from health, fitness, and fun, all the way to training to be competitive. If you found some value in this video, please hit the YouTube buttons, hit that like button, because it really does help the channel and the video and Teddy. Don't forget Teddy. All of the things, press the buttons, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.